Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Smaha, and I am Manomet's Director of Marketing and Communications. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever virtual field trip. If you love birds and you love travel, you will definitely enjoy this next hour. Our scientists, who are joining us from Massachusetts, Georgia, California, and Nicaragua, will show you around their favorite, local to them, places to bird. They'll talk about Manomet's work, the habitat they are seeing, and which birds they typically see at this location, and more broadly about the conservation challenges facing shorebirds. We are hoping for cooperation tonight from both the birds and the strength of our wireless connections and cell phone batteries. If you're new to Manomet, we are a science-driven sustainability nonprofit. Since Manomet's beginnings in 1969, our programs have branched out far beyond our Plymouth, Massachusetts based bird banding operation. With shorebird recovery and habitat management, forestry and climate science, fisheries, and more, Manomet has its foundation in science and works with many global partners to create a thriving future for us and for the birds. Just a couple of quick things before we begin. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a box marked Q&A. If you don't see it, use your mouse pointer to hover over the bottom and it should appear. If at any point during the presentation you have a question, feel free to click on that Q&A box to enter it. We are monitoring the Q&A and we will answer as many questions as possible during the webinar. If you're unable to stay with us for the entirety of tonight's presentation, it is being recorded. We will send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording in the next day or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now it is my pleasure to hand things over to our shorebird scientists, who will first do a brief introduction of themselves and let us know where they are joining us from tonight. First up is Monica Iglecia, and she is our Assistant Director for Shorebird Habitat Management, and she's joining us from California.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right? All right. Well, good afternoon for those of you on the Pacific Coast and good evening for those of you on the East Coast. I'm Monica Iglesia, Assistant Director of Shorebird Habitat Management with Manomet, and I am here in California. I'm actually based at the San Francisco Bay. I live in this area, and I'm really excited to share this area with you and to get to bring all of you to this really special place for me. The San Francisco Bay is a place that I have worked for many years, and it's a place where I've done shorebird research, and in the last few months it really has become my sanctuary. So the San Francisco Bay is actually a site of hemispheric importance. It's the only site of hemispheric importance within the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network here in California. And I happen to have a map, so I'm excited to be able to share that with you. So first of all, this is one of the older signs from the Wizard Network. And at the bottom, you can see all of the different partners that played a role in the designation of this area as a site of hemispheric importance. And I wanted to show you the map. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the San Francisco Bay, here it is. For those of you that may know California, this is San Francisco. This is the northern part of the San Francisco Bay called the San Pablo Bay. And this out here is the Delta. So water from the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River come out through the Delta and end up going into the bay and then out into the Pacific Ocean. We are way down here in Mountain View at the southern end of the San Francisco Bay. So that's where we'll be touring around today. And I'm excited to show you around.
Excellent. Next, we are going to head to Nicaragua, where we have Salvadora Morales, who is a conservation specialist for the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, or WHSRN for short.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I work for the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, and I am right now in Golfo de Fonseca in the Shorebird Reserve Delta del Estero Real in Nicaragua. We have here one of the best places. I am really happy to share with all of you my favorite place to see shorebird. We are receiving right now migratory birds, so we are, they stay some days here and then continue their journey. If we see, I will show you a little bit about the place. This is Gulf of Fonseca. This is what you are seeing is the part of Nicaragua. And I am moving just ahead, it's El Salvador, and a little bit more it's Honduras in the other side. So, and these all are the mud flat where the shorebird feed every day when it's low tide. And then when it's high tide, they go to the roosting area that are almost a lot of the shrimp farms around this site. So I am really happy to be here and share with all of you this place and our birds. So I hope to show you a little more.
Thank you so much, Salva. Next up, we're going to talk to Abby Sterling, who is a shorebird biologist for the Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative, and she's joining us from Georgia.
Hi, everyone. I am standing here at a wildlife management area called the Altamaha Wildlife Management Area. And I'm going to turn this around a little bit so that you can get a chance to see this very cool landscape, and I'll explain a little bit about what you're looking at. So out this way is the Altamaha River, and that's a really large, important drainage in the state of Georgia. It's one of the longest free-flowing rivers on the East Coast. It drains about a third of the state of Georgia, and this is the southern part of it. And then this area in here, where I'm standing at an observation tower, is a managed impoundment, and it's part of a large property that was historically used for rice. It was part of rice plantations, and these are impoundments that were created, most of them in the southeast, sort of dug by hand from enslaved people. So we see the remnants of ditches and dikes. If you look at aerial imagery in the southeast, this is the kind of landscape that you see from between the barrier islands on the coast and the interior. So a lot of these tidally influenced wetlands historically were used for rice agriculture, and they've been maintained for waterfowl. And now this area is actually a refuge for waterfowl, wading birds, and shorebirds. And so we've had a lot of rain in the last couple of days here. You can see we are still getting rain, and we will be getting more probably within the next few minutes here. But the impoundments are really filled up right now. And so I was out here a couple of days ago and they were packed with shorebirds, and now they're just a little bit too deep for shorebirds, but they're great for a lot of other wading birds. And so these areas, we're working with managers to manage them for shorebirds during migration. And so that is ongoing right now, and they're working here to actually drop the water level back down and create some good mud flats eventually for shorebirds. But right now, with all the wet weather we've been having, it is much better for wading birds than shorebirds.
Excellent. Thank you, Abby. Next, we're going to head over to Lisa Schibley, who is the North American coordinator for the International Shorebird Survey, and she's joining us from Massachusetts, which is a little bit closer to Manomet's headquarters.
Hi, I'm Lisa Schibley, and as Danielle said, I help coordinate the International Shorebird Survey. I am here at Ellisville Beach, which is just south of headquarters. Behind me, you can see a salt marsh, and in the middle of that salt marsh is a lovely mud flat. And most of the time, all of the shorebirds that hang out in this area are enjoying those mud flats. But right now, it's exactly high tide, and all of those mud flats are actually under about 1.5 feet of water, which means that all of the shorebirds come here to the beach. I'm going to switch it around. That didn't work. And the shorebirds hang out at their high tide roost here, which they're easier to see. And there are lots of really good shorebird places in Massachusetts. Brad's going to talk about one of them a little bit later, I think. But the favorite thing that I like about this spot is that it's 10 minutes from my house, which means that it is very easy to come and check on it and to see if they're shorebirds. And it's also very easy to conduct my International Shorebird Survey counts, which I try to do every 10 days. And since it's so close to my house, it's very easy. And I can't wait to show you some of my shorebird friends here.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And last but not least, tonight we also have joining us Brad Winn, and he is Director of Shorebird Habitat Management for Manomet, and he's also joining us from Massachusetts.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I am down here on the Outer Cape near Chatham, kind of on the gateway to the Manomet National Wildlife Refuge. And theoretically, Alan Neidel and Brian Harrington and I are supposed to be doing a Wimbrel roost count. And we've been doing this since late July. We are censusing the birds. The Wimbrels flying to a night roost area on an outer sandbar that they like to go to. We're trying to get a profile of what migration looks like for Wimbrels. And I started by saying we were supposed to be, but the fog, I'm not sure if you can see it behind me, the fog has rolled in and we can barely see over our heads. So we've actually canceled our boat trip out to where we're supposed to be going and are now stalking birds where we hope to find them. I just want to talk to you a little bit about salt marshes, and I'll just introduce myself briefly as Director of Shorebird Habitat Management for Manomet. And part of the work we're doing involves Wimbrels tracking for about, on the Cape, about 5 years. Our project has gone on for about 5 years. And then otherwise, I oversee all of our engagement with lots and lots of partners throughout the Americas on maintaining and protecting and in some cases restoring the habitat that these birds need. And a key one of those is right behind me. And as Lisa said, the tide is high here in Massachusetts, but we can take advantage of that to show you some salt marsh. And I'll come back in a little while and talk to you more about the valuable habitat and how salt marsh plays a role in shorebird migration. But welcome tonight, and I hope it's an enjoyable time for those that can't get out somewhere based on COVID restrictions. We are in a position to be in isolated spots and doing some research. So welcome, and thank you, Danielle, for hosting all this and such. So back to you.
All right, thank you very much. And just so everybody knows, we are also live on Facebook right now. So we may be getting some questions from the audience there. And I think first up, Monica has something that she would like to show us right now.
All right, there we go. I'll turn you around. So we're looking out on a mud flat. And as you can tell, it's a little bit hazy. For those of you that know, in California, we're having quite a few wildfires. And so while it looks very smoky, the air is actually some of the nicest air we've had in a long time, but the smoke is very high. And so we have an orange looking sky, which you may have seen people talking about. But I wanted to share a couple of birds here. Let's see if we can get you in there. All right, so I've got a couple species here. Let's see, anybody want to take a gander at what we've got? Do we recognize anything?
Excellent. If anybody wants to contribute, you can log on to the chat or drop something into the Q&A from the audience.
Okay, somebody said Stilton avocet. Nice job. Yeah, so we've got our very long-legged shorebirds here. So the black and white ones that are on the left and right, those are black-necked stilts. They've got their heads tucked. And then we've got American avocets in the middle. They are, well, one is preening. And we've got a duck in the background, we've got a mallard, and then hiding, we've got a long-billed dowitcher. So both black-necked stilts and American avocets, they're short-distance migrants, and they'll actually nest right here in the San Francisco Bay, in the salt ponds and the salt marsh. Cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica. Great. So does anybody else on our science staff have something they're ready to share right now?
I can, Danielle, if you can hear me.
Great, we can, Brad.
Yeah, I can circle back on salt marshes. I don't have any birds in view, but I wanted to talk to people about the intertidal area for shorebirds throughout the world. The shorebirds are honed into wet soils and wet sand, wet mud, and some of the reason for that is that the food resources for many of these birds exist just under the surface of this mud. So in the salt marsh, particularly in Cape Cod and throughout the world where salt marshes exist, they are rich with invertebrate life. So clams and worms and all kinds of other invertebrates live under the surface, and the birds are adapted to using their bills to probe into the soft sand. And when that sand dries out, or when the tide goes out and the mud and sands become more stable because the water seeps off of them, the physical nature of sand changes dramatically, and so their bills are less likely to penetrate and get into where the food resources are under the sand. So this sheet of water on the top is a tremendous key to for shorebirds to hone in on. Wet land, whether you're on farmland, whether you're on the edge of a lake, in mud, the birds that we are studying and working hard to conserve are tied into these semi-flooded wet areas. So wetlands throughout the world are under great pressure, development pressure for many reasons, development pressure from humans, and also sea level rise in the intertidal areas. The sea level is coming up and stressing some of these major systems that the shorebirds rely on. Salt marshes are a big part of the whimbrel's life cycle here along the east coast of the US, and both southbound and northbound whimbrels rely on the food resources of the marshes and then go out to outer barrier beaches for roosting at night. But during the day they work these marshes and are feeding on one primary food source. And I'm going to cut to somebody else, and I'm going to go to try to find one of these creatures that the whimbrels eat and get very fat on during their staging periods of migration. So I'm going to take a break here and turn it over to somebody else who might have a shorebird to show you.
All right, thank you, Brad. I do have a question that came in from the audience while we transition. So somebody wanted to know, Jenny Hook, if anybody is successfully using their iPhone with binoculars, and if so, what brand? So this might be a good opportunity to share about some of the logistics and gear that you are using right now. And if you want to just unmute yourself, if you want to share. If not, I think Abby might be ready to share too. Oh, there we go, Monica.
I was just going to say, so I'm not using my binoculars with my iPhone right now. I'm using the scope with my iPhone, and I recently just got a phone scope adapter. So my iPhone sits in a little plastic case, and then the whole thing, I can look right into the scope. It's a Swarovski scope, but sometimes I do use my binoculars, and it requires a steady hand. And I find if I'm sitting down with everything kind of resting on my knee, that can be really helpful.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. Great. We'll transition right over to Abby now, who was going to share about the impoundments. And then if anybody else has anything about their gear that they want to share after that, please pipe in.
Yeah, great. Well, I wanted to kind of explain a little bit more about the system that I'm here standing in, because it's a pretty cool setup. And so this is a managed impoundment, and that means that there are actually people that are out controlling the water levels of the impoundment. And I'm going to actually show you the structure they use to do that. And these floodgates that you're going to be able to see here, that is a flap on one side of high ground area. And on the other side, which you can't quite see, you can sort of see the top there, is another flap. And so those tidal rice trunk, that infrastructure allows managers to change the water level and the salinity of a place like this impoundment. And so you can see all the green on top of the water there is actually duckweed. And that's a really good indication that this water is fresh. The Altamaha River at this point is very fresh, and so the water is coming right in from the Altamaha River through that floodgate and coming in here. And there's actually a couple different sections of this impoundment that are all separated by land. So the managers are able to change the depth of the water throughout the year based on different constraints. And so here they're working to make habitat for ducks. They're making habitat for a lot of different things. And when we talk about making habitat, it is so complicated. It is incredible. The managers are focused on what plants, what vegetation, the structure of the vegetation, the height of the vegetation, and then how all of that relates to the invertebrates. Just like Brad was talking about, the base of the food chain in all of these wetlands is really the invertebrates that are growing there. So managers of impoundment systems like this are working really hard to balance all of these factors like rainfall and tides and salinity and vegetation to make habitat for wildlife, including shorebirds. And this system is a great opportunity to really increase the amount of habitat that we have available for shorebirds during migration and during winter and breeding as well. So you never know what you're going to find. And it's a really neat, very dynamic place.
Very cool. And I think Lisa has something to share.
If they stay, they're moving around. And of course, now they move out of the scope. They're just so mean. I am using a Samsung phone and a Koa scope. Oh, there they are. They're right at the bottom. Oh, they're coming to come back. And these are a kind of little peep. Let's see if I can. There. There they are. So does anybody have a guess what kind of peeps these are?
The chat box is quiet.
These are, oh, good guess. But these are actually semi-palmated sandpipers. They have black legs. They are, that's a good guess too. Western sandpipers is a good guess, except Western sandpipers are where Monica is. And the common sandpiper on the East Coast, which is where I am, I'm in Massachusetts, are the semi-palmated sandpipers. You spend a lot of time working very hard to find a Western sandpiper in a flock of semi-palmated sandpipers. So these guys are looking for little insects, little critters that are in the seaweed and in the rocks. And this is, again, at high tide. So they are not in the mud flats that are underwater right now. And, you know, there's semi-palmated sandpipers, because they're the most common ones here, but because they have that, they're small, smaller than sanderlings actually. They have the black legs rather than yellow legs. If they had yellow legs, they would be leaf. And they're not going to come back for me, are they? There they are. And the Western has the longer bill. So you got to look at the legs, you got to look at the bill, you got to look at the size. And they are so busy and they're finding lots to eat here. And I'm looking through a coascope.
Excellent.
All right.
All right. Monica, it looks like you have something in your scope over there. And we also have a question for you to talk about where, sorry, I lost my chat, where the birds are migrating to.
Yeah, okay. Well, so first we'll start with who's in the scope. As a good guess, we have a guess for a curlew. This is a very large shorebird and it's very cinnamon colored. If it would stop for just a moment, then you would be able to see it has a long, straight, and slightly upturned bill or recurved bill. We also have been photobombed by that American avocet. But it's a marbled godwit. So marbled godwits are short distance migrants. They breed in the prairies and they spend their winters here or as far south as northern Mexico. And in terms of where the birds are migrating to, you know, basically every bird you see has a different story, which is what's so much fun about learning about shorebirds. So that marbled godwit nests in the prairies. And then other species, well, the American avocet will nest right here. And then we also have some long-billed dowitchers out here, and they'll be nesting further north. Well, we haven't seen them yet, but I've been hearing black-bellied plovers. Those will also be nesting up in the Arctic. So right now it's fall migration. So shorebirds are generally on their southbound migration. Some of them have already arrived where they plan on spending their overwintering season, but some are just stopping here to forage and then continue further south. Some may be going as far south as Chile and other places in South America.
Excellent. Thank you. Brad, it looks like you have something that you're ready to share.
Oh, you can't hear me. How about now?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I took a little bit of effort, but I dug up a fiddler crab and just wanted to show people what drives whimbrels and why, you know, they can migrate these thousands of miles. These birds leave New England and fly nonstop down to South America, but they come into Massachusetts after coming out of Hudson Bay and farther north and farther west actually, and come down and stage or stop over and put on a lot of weight. And the weight the whimbrels put on is attributed to eating these little guys all day long. And salt marshes are the realm of the fiddler crab. And the whimbrels will grab these little guys and knock that big, this is a male fiddler crab, will knock that big claw right off of it after they catch it. And then essentially either swallow the whole thing or then eat all the legs off of it and swallow the body whole. And not so good for the crab, but the whimbrels put on something like they gain 3/4 of their body weight in 3 to 4 weeks. Then they fly out across the ocean and they go nonstop down into the tropics, Caribbean, some Caribbean islands, or South America from to Brazil. So they're coastal, they rely on mangroves primarily when they're in the tropics. another incredible wetland plant. The mangrove forests of the tropics are super important for a lot of life, and not just whimbrels or other shorebirds. So I'm gonna let this guy go. They dig burrows in that nice long bill of the whimbrels can go down the burrows these guys dig. So this guy's very lucky I'm not a whimbrel, but he's gonna go off into the grass and be there for a hungry shorebird a little bit later. But thought I'd show you that guy, and then over to somebody else who has a real bird, because I'm whimbrelless out here in this marsh. So hopefully somebody maybe Monica can find a nice whimbrel out there in the San Francisco Bay.
I haven't seen a whimbrel in a while, unfortunately, but I'll keep an eye out right now.
Brad, we do have a follow-up question about how would the whimbrel handle the crab shell in the digestive process?
Okay, good question. They actually swallow the whole thing whole, and then their gizzards do the rest, and they've got a very strong, you're familiar with all the muscle in a chicken gizzard. For those of you who eat chicken, the gizzard will take the whole crab in and crush it, and then digest the meaty parts, and there you go. And they do that all day long. We've watched them eat sometimes a couple per minute. They can really move through crabs when they get into the thick of them, and they do it just about all day, except for when the tide is super high and all of those nice feeding marsh edges and marsh flats are cut off. They roost and rest, and that's another important part of shorebird migration, is these birds need to be resting at high tide, which is a driver for a lot of the work we do. Beach nesting birds and some of these Arctic migrants that come down to the beaches of the east coast of the US will need to feed and eat all day long, and they put on that weight, that migration weight they need. And if there's too much disturbance from us during the summertime, late summer, they don't have places to rest. So we're working hard to find those locations that the shorebirds not only need to feed in, but also have a good, quiet, safe resting spot so they can digest. Oh, I see my friend running into the grass. He's still out here. And he is not happy. Let me see if I can show you. Can you see that claw up on that guy? Yeah, he is not happy, but there he goes. He's gonna go with his friends anyway. So the high tide roosts are super important in our conservation efforts, as well as these feeding sites. So Monica, how about let me see if we can order up a long-billed / short-billed dowitcher. Do you have a dowitcher somewhere in front of you? Let's challenge Monica.
Oh,
since she has the birds. Oh,
Hold
yeah?
on. Oh yeah, a flock just came in right in front of me. So let me just try to get him in the scope. I was watching Avocet's preening. All right, so we have a marbled godwit walking off to the left. And then in between those ducks, let's see if I can zoom us in a little bit. Just like Brad was talking about how birds need to rest and have places to spend that are safe during high tide, they also spend a lot of time preening. So that's what's happening here. You can see some of these dowitchers scratching their face. Are you able to see these all right?
Yeah, really well. Can you hear me, Monica, if I talk?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a challenge. I thought you weren't going to be able to find one, but you showed me. Okay, so who knows if these are short-billed or long-billed? So in the shorebird world, there are a few really tough calls, and the dowitchers may be one of the toughest. Dowitchers and sometimes yellow legs, greater yellow legs, lesser yellow legs. But yeah, so any guesses about what kind of dowitchers these might be?
You just jump right into the heart of the most challenging identification. Just dive right in. I did see somebody ask about ducks, who the ducks are. And these are mostly northern shovelers. And I'm trying to find one that doesn't have its bill tucked because they have big spoon-shaped bills. But they are all sleeping right now, so we'll have to keep an eye out. All right, so we have somebody identified long-billed dowitcher. Brad, what do you think?
So we've been round and around on this. I think you probably have both there. I'm gonna take the easy route out. I think you have both. But I'm gonna say with the downturn I'm seeing on a lot of those bills about 3/4 of the way out, I'm gonna say short-billed dowitchers with that little droop at the end, and the super long, super straight ones, especially the female long-billed dowitchers are just really long. They look like bill length almost of one of your godwit out there. So I'm gonna throw short bills out.
Sounds good. I'm going to just point out that one that's bathing, you can see a white wedge on its back. Oh, there you go. You've got a nice view of that. That's something that both short-billed and long-billed dowitchers have. And so when you see a flock of birds that have a big white wedge going up their back, that just might be a dowitcher. So,
can you hear them talking, Monica? That's a key. The long-bills and short-bills do have different voices, but you got so many birds there, it's going to be hard to pick out a dowitcher calling or talking.
They're actually been pretty quiet. The stilt's not so quiet. I actually, when long-billed dowitchers tend to be more chatty than short-bills in my experience, and so when I do hear them, I do hear long-billed dowitchers. Check out how that marbled godwit's using its really long bill to get at some hard to reach places.
So something people like to understand is how in the world when those long-billed shorebirds stick their bill all the way down to the mud, how are they actually grabbing anything?
Yeah, super sensitive. They're extremely tactile, and the ends of their bills are a little bit flexible, and so they're able to really pick out some invertebrates.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad and Monica. I think Lisa has something to share over back in Massachusetts.
When Brad was talking about the shorebirds using the roost areas, this is exactly what he was talking about. These are also all semi-palmated sandpipers. And sorry, I'm having trouble holding this still because this is on the maximum zoom on my scope. So this is a 60 zoom, power zoom. And then I actually also have a 2 power zoom on my phone camera. So we're looking at stuff that's 120 zoomed, I think, if I did my math right. So I'm having trouble holding it still. But you can see they're all sleeping. They're preening a little bit. And there's probably 200 of these guys on this beach right now. So you can't see them in my camera. But if you just imagine those little basically are in groups, about 200 of them along this whole beach. And the tide's going to be going down. It's just about high tide right now. Tide's going to be going down in 2 hours, far enough to uncover the mud flats. And so all these guys are going to take off and fly right over this little barrier beach and land in those beautiful juicy mud flats just on the other side and have a very nice snack before nightfall.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And I think we have birds down in Nicaragua too. Salvadora, can you hear us, or can you tell us what you're seeing? Oh. Salvadora, we can. All right, it looks like we are trying to figure out how we can hear Salvadora right now, but while we're waiting, I have a few questions for everyone. The first one is about whimbrels. Do West Coast whimbrels migrate to the same places as East Coast whimbrels migrate to? And what are the typical migration routes for West Coast whimbrels?
Goodness, what a great question. The answer is no. The Alaskan birds from somewhere, mid-Alaska west are all going down to the Pacific coast, and they go to pull along the Pacific coast of South America. So they are super migrants. Some go all the way down to the tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego, Bahia Lomas, and the haunts way down there. So those are all of the Alaskan birds going west. Recently, Manomet has tracked a whimbrel from eastern Alaska, actually in the National Wildlife Refuge, all the way across to across the Arctic, North American Arctic, to eastern Canada. It's staged in far eastern Canada and then dropped from there down all the way straight to Brazil from eastern Canada. So a tremendous migration. But if you look at the quickest way to get to the mangroves and all those nice South American crabs that live in the mangrove roots, and you start in eastern Alaska, the quickest route and the most expedient route is exactly what the birds do, is flying all the way along the curve of the earth through the Arctic and pretty high up in the Arctic, all the way down to eastern Canada, and then dropping down. If you have a globe in your house, check that route out, and it's a really pretty much a straight line. So the eastern birds are really interesting. We have birds at the Mackenzie River Delta. Our colleagues at Canadian Wildlife Service and William and Mary, the Center for Conservation Biology, have tagged birds in the Mackenzie River Delta, which is the far western part of Canada, just before you get to Alaska. And they do that same route. And then interestingly, they come up through the Gulf of Mexico. Really curiously, to confuse things, we have birds at Cape Cod that do some of the same flight. So they go off of Massachusetts, go down to South America. When they're coming north, they go all the way across the north coast of South America, across the Caribbean Ocean, and then across the Gulf of Mexico, all in one shot. So 4,000 plus miles in one flight. They stage in the Gulf of Mexico, and then they come up to the Hudson Bay lowlands. So they kind of come straight up and a little bit to the east.
Excellent.
We really are dealing with
Brad, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I still here?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Where did I lose you? Did I drop out?
You did drop out.
I can wrap up quickly to say that the East Coast birds are mostly around the Hudson Bay lowlands, which is west side of Hudson Bay, and most of those birds, all of those birds, go east and down and stage at least one time on the way south, and then critically, what we're trying to figure out is where these stopover places are. So I'll wrap it with that, and thank you for that great question.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Abby?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if it's helpful at all for folks that are trying to visualize some of those places that the whimbrel go, there's a little bit of a range map for you where the orange are the breeding areas. So you can see there's a couple different spots that are breeding areas. And then we've got winter, and then as Brad was saying, they go much farther south that's not included in this map. So that's just for folks that are trying to do some geography in their minds, a little bit of a visual aid for you there. So we still don't have many shorebirds, we have no shorebirds here. We have a lot of wading birds, and I don't know if, were we able to get back to Salva, or is she having some connective issues? Because I feel like she hasn't gotten to share much.
Let's try again. Salva? Are you there?
Hi, I am here. I am having some problems. Yeah, I have very far shorebird, but close to me there is some pips, leaf sandpiper, and ruddy thornstone. But it's not easy to see right now. I will try to show you. So right now it's low tide, and all the birds are dispersed feeding. So I will try to move.
Excellent. We will try to check back in with you in a few minutes. We have about 15 more minutes of tonight's presentation, and we do have a few questions. So it looks like we can transition over to Lisa, who has some things to show us right now as well. And then I'm going to throw out that we do have a question, if anybody wants to tackle it, from Facebook. I have learned that some shorebirds have sensitive nerve endings at the tip of their bill to feel around for invertebrates such as worms. Is this true? And if so, do many shorebirds have this trait?
I will show my black-bellied plovers while I let Brad or Abby answer the question. How does that work?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over. Monica had a good explanation, and I'll turn it over to Abby or Monica. You guys want to talk about that?
Hey, yeah, so I'm actually not sure if all shorebirds are that sensitive, but I know some shorebirds, especially those with the really long bills, have extremely sensitive bills and nerve endings, like the marbled godwit and the long-billed dowager and short-billed dowagers. I believe it's called rhinokinesis, which is that. It might be the sensitivity, or that actually might be the word for the flexibility, the way they can sort of flex the end of their bills.
Yeah, I was searching for that word, Monica, and that's partly why I didn't chime in. I think that's the way they can actually move the upper and the lower mandible independently. So sometimes you can see some really crazy configurations, especially with the very long-billed shorebirds, able to move sort of the tip of their bill while they're looking, kind of feeling around for food down underneath the soil.
Right,
Yeah,
and that sensitivity helps them feel that movement.
Yeah, there's actually a pressure sensitivity as well. So the bill goes in, and they can sense the pressure of nearby prey in the mud, and can then divert their probing over to grab whatever it is that's near the end of their bill. So yeah, really neat adaptation for the birds, finding stuff that they can't see under the mud. Good question.
But one thing that's interesting is, for example, like the black-bellied plover we were just looking at, is that they have really big eyes. And so that really big eye is useful for them to actually visualize and look for their prey. So plovers will do something like maybe take a couple steps, wiggle their feet, hopefully to dislodge an invertebrate or get an invertebrate to make a run for it. And then they'll actually look for that movement, and then they'll jump on their prey, which is really different from those dowagers, which they plunge their bill into the sediment and they're feeling around for movements from invertebrates. So just different foraging strategies.
Excellent. We have another question about bills. A lot of shorebirds have longish bills with slight variations, upturn, downturn, etc. Why? Do they feed on different foods, so the variations in the bills make it easier to catch their kind of food? Monica, do you want to jump in?
I'm happy to jump in. Sure, yeah. So the bills really can indicate the kinds of, that question was spot on, that the bills can really indicate the kinds of foods that the birds are eating. And so trying to think about the birds we've seen. I like one of my favorite ways that Brad describes a willet, the bill of a willet, is an all utility tool. And we haven't seen a willet yet today, but they have a pretty stout bill. And then, for example, if you think about a ruddy turnstones have short wedge-shaped bills that are very strong, and they use those to flip over rocks and shells as they look for the foods that they eat. So the bill shape and size and length sort of indicate the kinds of foods that they're eating, although some shorebirds can really eat specific types of invertebrates, like Brad was talking about the whimbrel and the fiddler crabs, while others might be a little bit more opportunist and eating all kinds of invertebrates that they're finding.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Salva, can you tell us what we're seeing right now on your camera?
I think she's muted.
Yeah. We are trying, but for some reason we seem to be having some technical, difficulties unmuting her. We are sorry about that. Let's see. Abby, did I see you looking at a field guide just a minute ago?
Yeah, in the absence of shorebirds, I always think it's very helpful to have a field guide. This is a Schibley guide, and just to kind of highlight sort of what Monica was talking about with the diversity of bills, you can see there really is a huge range of different bill lengths and bill shapes, and taking a look at the bills is really one of the best ways to identify shorebirds. So if you're diving into this world of shorebird ID, that can be super helpful. And you see some of the plovers up here with their little stubby bills and their big eyes because they're visual hunters versus some of the others that have these nice long bills for probing down into sediments. One of our personal favorites in Georgia is the American oyster catcher, which you would never see in a place like this impoundment because they are out in tidal creeks and along barrier islands in oyster beds, and they actually have a bill that's laterally compressed. It looks just like a shucking knife that you use to open up oysters. And so they run around on oyster beds and pop open oysters and eat them. So that's pretty, a very well adapted bill that helps them access really difficult food items. I'll turn it back over to get Salva on here.
Excellent. Salva?
So, yeah, so I have a Rudy Thorson here. Hello.
Yes, we can hear
I have a Rudy Thorson here and a semi-palmated plover. So the shorebirds are beginning to come. Oh, I don't know if some peeps are moving. So the water is coming.
Excellent.
Salva,
That
what
is
is
so cool.
How much does the tide come in there?
How much a species?
Yeah,
We
well,
have least. Yeah, we have least Wilson's plover, and more are semi-palmated plover. They are just here, very close right now. And some are beginning to move probably to the shrimp farms. Yeah.
Excellent. Lisa, it looks like you have something to show us right now. So we'll come over to you. There we go. Lisa,
All right, there we go. So this is exactly what Salva was talking about. This is a semi-palmated plover. And you can see Abby was talking about the American oyster catcher bill, how large it was. And this is the absolutely opposite end of the spectrum. It has one of the smallest bills of a sandpiper, and it's a surface feeder. It feeds off of the surface. So the plovers are known to have relatively short bills, and they have the bands. The semi-palmated plovers have these bands and these yellow legs, and they're also as cute as buttons. One of my favorite plovers, one of my favorite shorebirds.
Thank you. So we have about 5 more minutes left tonight. I have a few more questions left. So if you have anything that you'd love to ask Abby, Brad, Salva, Monica, or Lisa, please submit a question now and we'll try to get to it. So our question is about why, this comes to us from Costa Rica. Why do some willets and whimbrels stay in Costa Rica? They do not seem to migrate.
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. Some of the larger shorebirds take 2 or 3 years to mature. And so those birds that stay for a number of years in one place or along the coast of South America are younger birds, and they will be migrating eventually. Some of the whimbrels that we put transmitters on have stayed over 2 different winters, and then migrated their third or even 4th spring going north. So both willets and whimbrels will do that and take more than 1 year to mature. So you have a lot of young birds there during the non-breeding season. I wanted to just skip. I did see birds earlier just to show you that there are shorebirds on Cape Cod, and besides the ones Lisa is seeing up near in Plymouth, I wanted to show you this young, it's a young sanderling, really nice checkery, beautiful young sanderling coming down from pretty high up in the Arctic. The sanderlings are one of the higher Arctic nesters, and a very checkery back with a nice buff color on them. I'm not sure how well you can see that in the back of my camera, but they're really gorgeous at this time of year, the young ones. And that will all molt out by the winter time, and that bird will be gray just like the adults. And they overwinter here in Massachusetts. So that's all. Any more questions there, Danielle? Sorry, I cut you off.
We do. So what is the peak time of shorebird migrations along the Massachusetts to Delaware coast?
Well, I can keep going if you want, or somebody else can just wade in, but Massachusetts is a fall thing. If you want to see shorebirds in Massachusetts, because they have this kind of an oblong, many of them have circular migration that goes up the coast or interior of the U.S. and across Canada in the spring. Many of them come down along the Atlantic, especially the young ones that don't quite know where they're going. So peak shorebird migration is for Massachusetts is probably the latter part of August right into early September. I would say that would be the peak. And in the spring, it's a shorter push going through Massachusetts, and May would be probably early May would be the time to go look, but there are far fewer of them.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we have answered almost all the questions that we've received tonight. And I'm glad that we were able to show our viewers shorebirds in Massachusetts and California and Nicaragua. We really appreciate your time and for taking us all on this field trip. I know that many of our audience are longtime members and supporters of Manomet, and so I just wanted to say thank you. We are very grateful for your generosity and commitment. We hope to see you again very soon. Our next webinar is actually the morning of September 15th, and we'll be taking you on a behind-the-scenes look at our banding lab. And if you'd like more information on that webinar, please visit our website at manomet.org, and we hope to see you then. Thank you all for coming tonight, and hope you have an excellent evening, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions or comments. Thank you so much.